Seth, good afternoon, buddy.
How we doing? Happy Friday once again.
You can see I've added to my empty apartment with a lovely decorative TV box behind me.
You're cultivating a beautiful ambiance that anybody listening to this in podcast form will never get to appreciate,
That's
unfortunately.
right. For everyone here, I've added to the empty apartment. I have it's definitely a bachelor style. I have movie posters, right? Goodfellas, obviously, Jaws,
Get that
Indiana
man a Starry
Jones.
Night poster.
I tell you, very, very cliche. But it's good to kind of start living as a normal human being now. Have a full on mattress, and so things are good.
Stepping it
Well,
up.
the one thing that you have in your apartment, which for those that don't know, Seth has got these amazing turntables,
Yep, you can kind
and
of see him if you
look
look
at that.
well behind me in that little corner right there.
Oh,
One, two. Yeah, yeah.
man. Now, I got to tell you this, Seth being, my co-founder, partner, former roommate, all this stuff. I bequeath these. I think that means if I die, right? I gave these to Seth as someone who I knew would appreciate vinyl and the experience of vinyl, and especially for today's topic, we're talking about DJ, which back in the day meant tune turntables and a microphone.
Where it's
Uh,
at.
and today it's much different. And there's been a lot of debate of, is the DJ an artist or essentially just playing and pushing buttons? Uh, and it's a very interesting debate, Seth. I don't know what you had opinions on it before researching for today's episode.
I definitely did. This is what I think what emerged to me as I was researching and thinking about this stuff is how broad people use the terminology of DJ, how many different things fall under that umbrella. And so the DJ, as it's thought of in modern music, which is really kind of like the EDM version of the DJ, I have some thoughts about that.
Yeah.
But I think if you broaden that definition to be, more of an MC type thing, a wedding DJ, more of an old school when you're mixing live, like it can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And it for a lot of people, it falls under one term, which is more that button pusher. But I actually think that's not really a fair assessment of what DJs often do. And we can get into the specifics later. We're also lucky enough today that, Scott, you are an actual experienced real club DJ. So in a former life. So we'll talk about it at the end of the podcast, but important to acknowledge that we have a certified expert for maybe the first time in the history of this podcast.
That's right. That's right. This is some shameless self-promotion here. But yes, I used to DJ back in the day, and we'll get into that. But I think what you said, Seth, is really interesting. That what is a DJ? I think growing up, I just remember them from weddings. It was a dude who you wanted to hear him play YMCA, and he had a stack of CDs, right, in these folders, and they were always in the corner. There was no stage, and it was a very almost like a side gig. It was never seen as like, oh my God, who's DJing the wedding tonight? And then you have people now just on the other extreme that they're headlining major concert festivals.
Yeah. And making money commensurate with those headlining performances, right?
So. Exactly. And it's really been amazing to see this evolution. But I think what we're talking about in the debate here is this: are they an artist or not? And I think that goes along with, well, what are you talking about? We really need to kind of go apples to apples. Like, okay, a wedding DJ, I don't think anyone would kind of say they're an artist as the same definition of like a Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
All right. And we're just going artist and artist, right? You can say anything as an artist these days.
Sure.
But to me, what I understand, and I have a good friend, a very good friend who's a wedding DJ. And a lot of what he does is promotion, is planning. And a lot of it is the MC. It's the kind of the one who is the voice, essentially, of that wedding, and you tell maybe a little story. It's almost like a fifth speaker.
Yeah. And you underratedly control the mood of a large group of people, right? Whether that's a 100-person wedding in an Elks Club hall or 30,000 people in an arena or a club in Vegas, like however you're producing the music itself, your responsibility is an underratedly important one. It's maybe
Yep.
a way to think of it is like going into a bar and someone puts a shitty song on the jukebox and it kind of like ruins the whole vibe.
Oh,
The DJ has to do that for, hours and hours and hours, regardless of the classification. We'll break them down. But even the
yeah.
term DJ is a little bit, I don't want to say derogatory, but it stands for disc jockey, right? Like
Yeah.
to me, even that almost, it's like, I don't know, like an anything jockey feels a little
Yeah.
bit like dismissive. And I don't know if it originated that way, but when you think about it, like, hey, man, your job is just to lug the discs, throw them on the plate,
Yeah.
and let them roll. Like you're not doing anything. But before we even go into the sort of like artistry and production side of things, I think it's important to acknowledge there's a reason people still hire wedding DJs versus plugging an iPod or an iPhone.
Yeah.
And that's changing a little bit, but it's about the holistic experience. Your job is to cultivate the mood. And for a lot of people, that is worth the time and effort that a DJ has to put in. However you think about them as an artist, they're
Yep.
still critical to the experience.
Definitely. I think you said it well, where it's a very powerful position you're in. If you think about, you're setting the nervous system for an entire party, and especially weddings, sometimes they're dropping $100,000, and there you are. And if you're putting on a horrible song, some ambient track, it like kills the vibe, the memories, the dancing. Uh, so it is, in terms of a wedding DJ, it's a pretty big role. But even at parties, like house parties, you say, who's playing DJ tonight? That's always this thing that I thought funny, that people just say, oh, I'm going to DJ. This kind of term you throw out. Like, you can't really say, hey, I'm just going to go play the saxophone and see what you guys think. But I also think it shows a little bit of that accessibility, that there is a little bit of a low barrier to entry if you're talking about the lowest end of being a DJ, which is just putting on some songs.
Yeah. And talking about a wedding, I mean, like, there's so much planning, like you said, money that's being spent. No one's going to remember the centerpieces or how good the appetizers were.
Yeah.
But if the music is shit,
Oh,
people are going to remember that and talk about it. Like, we couldn't even dance. The music was shitty. So like, that is so critical. And even down to, like you said, a party, it's definitely, it's brought to prominence the importance of the aux cord, for sure. Now we got Bluetooth,
yeah.
but the idea, like, who
Yeah.
controls the cord, who gets to plug in,
Yeah.
you have to give a lot of trust to your friends to be the one to kind of control that and cultivate that vibe. So not to be understated.
Yeah, and I think what you'll see now is almost like the DJ came where they were in the dark, even in clubs, just to tell you, in even the 70s and 80s, the DJ was still in a corner. It looked like the janitor's corner. There was no stage, real big stage for the DJ, or they were in almost like in a balcony, a ways away, almost like the control center of even like places like Studio 54. Important, but it was never about the DJ. Even at Studio 54, it wasn't like, tonight we're going to see this. The people were the party. The DJ was almost like the guy was doing the lighting. It's like, it's a necessary part. But it's really involved, from them going from that dark corner to, okay, tonight we're going to start to advertise this DJ because he plays this style of music. Now, instead of people dancing, it's a concert type format. They're facing the DJ. Mm-hmm. So imagine like someone playing with a remote and like, we're going to watch this dude play with a remote control. And I think as the technology has made DJing almost automatic, now I think that's where the debate started to arise. Like, hey man, this dude's just pressing play.
Well, the funny part is, it seems like the confluence of things getting easier and the ability to just press play kind of aligned nicely with the emergence of this becoming like a performance.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? Like, you could argue 35 years ago, there's people really spinning and mixing live, and that is a show unto itself.
Yeah.
But what's packing arenas and getting them paid $300,000 a night in a club in Vegas is really guys that there's a skill set involved in creating that music to begin with. And again, we'll talk about sort of DJ as producer, where you're essentially showcasing the thing you created.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that as it got easier and less of like a visual spectacle, the person themselves, that's when the idea of putting them front and center became prominent. And so do you have a sense of like when that shift happened, or who is the first DJ to
Yeah.
like headline clubs where they are the attraction, and you're not listening and kind of doing something else. You're watching that person perform. When is that?
I
When did that start? Who started it? I don't have a
I
sense of that.
yeah, it really started in the UK, in fact. And this is my opinion. But even in New York, when you had the disco craze of the kind of mid to late 70s with Studio 54 and places like the Warehouse, where it was really about this show. And it was all about people just being free and dancing. And it was where the beat took preference or took priority over the lyrics, right? It was
Yeah.
just all about these like hypnotic rhythmic beats. But it was in the UK, and especially with the Hacienda, which is this legendary club in Manchester,
Yeah.
where the medium, they started to cheer the DJ, the guy up in the balcony or the guy in the corner. And that was really a paradigm shift of it wasn't the guy who made the music, right? A producer, or wasn't the band. It wasn't the dancers. It was the actual medium. Like, I am not doing anything except putting the record on. And that's when I saw it. And I actually was living in England at the time. And this was guys like John Digweed, Sasha, right? Name, just Sasha, Paul Oakenfold. And it was amazing to see this. And they were competing or at this, this was the club that New Order owned. And so you had actual traditional bands, but this was the first time I saw it was like, holy shit, this dude is now on the stage. We're clapping this person playing records. And that's what it was that time. It was just vinyl records.
That's a far more, no, that's incredibly helpful for me, because I really wasn't sure when that pivot happened.
Yeah.
And you pinpointed it pretty exactly. I just did some unintentional research recently to understand the importance of the Hacienda and kind of factory records and how that shaped this Manchester scene. But I guess I didn't understand like the offshoot piece of like it drove like DJ as star of the show scene for the first time.
Yeah.
So that's incredibly insightful and educational to me. That's fascinating.
And that's when I got into it, because it was accessible. I think to me, I'll never forget. It was 1992 or three. I was in Spain, in Barcelona, and a lot of the British would vacation or take holiday to Spain because it was cheap and it's pretty and sunny and whatnot. And they were bringing down a lot of these records, and they were mixing it with also taking ecstasy, right, while they were recording. So the sounds were very hippie, they were very hypnotic. And it was the first time I saw this. I heard this beat without, like, it wasn't Whitney Houston or wasn't a remix. It was just a typical beat. And there's a guy spinning, and there were no labels on the records. And I was like, this is the coolest everything. And the crowd was more manic than I had ever seen at a concert, because it was like they were participating. It was more like a dead show, essentially, if those where the crowd is the show, and the DJ was on the floor. And I thought that was powerful. Like, you don't see that in concerts, right? Like, I think logistically it'd be kind of weird. You'd have to crowd to the centerpiece, whatever. But it was new and it was innovative, and it got me hooked. When I flew back home, I bought turntables, and I didn't know where to go. I was like, okay, where do I get records? And even that was its own scene. Well, one of the things about the DJ was they had their own stores. So it was a very focused profession in a way. They had a place made for you, and no one else would go there. So because you didn't have record players, right? So if you're like, hey, I like dance music, there was no way to really get it unless you went to a club and you heard it, because the turntables were very expensive. Now you can get them on Amazon for like $50 because vinyl's coming back in. But at the time, it was a big investment. I remember it was like maybe like $2,000
per turntable.
Per turntable. And these were heavy Technics turntables. And there was no lessons. There's no instructional videos. There's no, like, it wasn't an industry that was trying to grow. It was very, very niche. And it was difficult. It was very difficult. One, to teach yourself how to beat match, because you had to match beats. Now, in technical language, it's all done computerized now. So it'd almost be like doing math, and now you have a calculator. So you'd say, that guy's amazing at math. Look how fast he can do it. And you're like, okay, that dude does it with a calculator, and he's also doing other things. And literally that's the difference. I'll tell you that right now. To match beats live is a completely different thing than what's happening today with DJs, which, as you said, it's more a showcase. It's more like, here's the movie I made, and everyone appreciate the sounds. But essentially, and they even admit it. They're just press play. So it's less about a DJ and more like, hey, here's the producer, and I'm going to kind of dance
Yeah.
in front of the machines.
It's kind of like you even see bands do that and have done that for a long time. The idea of like a listening party. It's
Yeah.
functionally that disguised as a performance, but it was much different when you did it. I was even thinking like that beat matching. I'm also sure that's something you cannot practice doing that in the chaos of a club, right? It's one thing to do it in your apartment with headphones, get a good sense of it, but you described to me it's like the things are hanging from chains from the ceiling. There's people coming up trying to give you drugs. There's a lot
Yeah.
happening.
Oh yeah.
And so how are you doing this fairly high touch skill with
Yeah.
all this other shit going on? And that in of itself is a real skill that is kind of
It's
not deteriorated, but it's no longer necessary.
it's really, I mean, it's hard for me. It's almost like you've been practicing homemade dishes and then there's a TV dinner that you just microwave, and it's like, oh, it's the same thing. And so when I saw Paris Hilton DJing and she's taking photos of herself, and she's like, you can't do that when you're actually beat matching. It's very, very difficult. And guys like Paul Oakenfold, a lot of the UK DJs, Sasha, John Digweed, are very skilled. Not only at you have to pick the right, curate the right records, you got to mix them the right way, and you're alternating between your partner, whatever, you know, it goes from Digweed, and you have to entertain, right? You have to read the crowd. It's a just like a, I know, I think a wedding DJ would the same thing, but it's
Yes.
a skill. And I will never forget this. I went to a rave out in Golden Gate Park, and a dude he told me about it too. I said, where are your records? He's sorry. I have it towards me deeper because of the echo.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, I'll start again. I'm learning. Let's just,
You're good.
okay. So
Golden
I
Gate
said,
Park.
oh yeah, yeah. So Seth, I went to this party in the Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, kind of like their version of Central Park, and it was this rave. And I remember looking for the DJs crates of records. Normally, you had to bring in 4 or 5 crates of records because you didn't know how long you're going to spend for, and you want to make sure you didn't leave that special album, right? So they're heavy, and it takes a lot. So just telling you, even the prep work. This dude shows up with 2 turntables, but they were different turntables that I'd never seen, and a laptop. And I remember him looking at me going, oh, yeah, dude, that's the old way. You don't need records anymore. Everything's on my computer. And I was like, well, what are the turntables for? He's like, oh, it's just kind of to mimic. It's kind of like to make it look like you're doing it, which was that transition phase. But it was actually a turntable size.
Yeah.
Now they have it where they're like almost like CDs, basically, because they're trying, basically, they want to look like they're doing something, but really you could just have 3 buttons.
Yeah. It's relatively low it's relatively low action while you're on stage. Again,
Yes.
I love to hear your thoughts. So I don't want to jump ahead, but sort of, do you have a different kind of appreciation for assuming that they're playing music that they created, like a Dead Mouse
Yeah.
is a good example, right?
Yeah.
Those are all his beats, those are all his drops, etc. Do you just feel like that's sort of it's like weird to even call them both DJs because what they're actually doing is so different? Or I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, your thoughts there.
Well, I think, well, first of all, I want to give respect to like the hip hop DJs, because that was a true skill where they didn't have bands, right? And the Bronx, and they were literally scratching and mixing, and the MC was so important to these parties, the DJ and the MC. And the scratching, that is a completely different. I don't even know what's an analogy for that, but maybe like your ultimate jazz musician, where it's so intricate and so difficult. So I even say to myself, oh, I'm a house DJ. And that's different from a hip hop DJ. The hip hop DJ, the turntables are oriented differently. You're using scratch, you're beat juggling. It is like the most advanced. So even in my sense, I'd be like, oh, no, I'm not, I can't do that. I look at today's DJs, and I wouldn't even call him a DJ. I would say it's like a promotional vehicle for my production.
Yep,
So I'm
that's
an
a great way to say it.
amazing producer, and what I'm going to, I'm just going to showcase my music. I'm not playing it. I'm just pressing play. I think the part that is, I'd say, irritating is when it makes it look like they're doing stuff.
Yeah,
And that's a little bit of maybe the promotions or the, because think about it. Hey, I'm going to pay all this money to go watch a guy push play. You
yeah.
almost feel like there's a deception. Like, what? I don't understand. I want to see a performance. You're like, well,
I almost feel like that has given rise. I hear you, and I almost feel like that has given rise to um everything besides the DJ. So
yeah,
it's lasers, it's strobe lights, it's smoke, it's all of these other things. It's almost like going to see, this isn't the right thing, but like going to see Cirque du Soleil, right? You're
yeah,
going for like a sensory overload of which music is just one part of it, and everything is
mhm,
sort of structured around it,
yeah,
but it is one piece of the performance you're seeing. You're not necessarily going there to see Dead Mouse per se. You're not
yeah,
going to see his performance. You're going to sort of see him as celebrity, right? All these guys are so famous now. Steve Aoki, like there's
yeah,
something cool about like the guy whose songs I love is right there. But it's almost
yeah.
the same experience as like, it's almost like I get to listen to Steve Aoki. I get to watch Steve Aoki listen to his own music and
That's
how
it.
he reacts to it.
And
So
that's not,
that's the show. It's not the performance of the
yeah.
music. It's the feeling of it's a communal sensory experience, and you get to share it with the guy who created it. And I think that's kind of cool for people.
That's it. And that's to me, it's 100% marketing, right? If you look at a
Yeah.
promoter's challenge, you're like, okay, think about this, Seth. Like, okay, DJing is almost a dead art. Literally, it's a button. So how do we promote this? Well, let's get a light show. We're going to put him on the stage. We're going to put all these machines out there. So it looks like they all look like they have to take a piss. They kind of like bopping their head. Like,
Well, it's like
and
a singer who's used to playing guitar and then you take their guitar away.
yeah,
Or if you ever
dude,
seen a hockey player skate without a stick, they
yeah.
like don't know what to do with their hands. It's kind of the same idea. Yeah,
It's the
yeah.
same. They're kind of and they'll like mimic the beat, and it's a little bit ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
It's let's just call it for what it is, and I think that's a bit of the rub where everyone's like, "Hey, man, like you're just pressing a button." Um, but I will say the production is unbelievable. Some of these
Yeah.
artists, but it
And
actually
it's
DJing,
scientific too, right?
yeah,
I mean, it's they have such a good sense of like, here are the sounds that like they know how to. We talked about controlling the energy of a
yeah,
room at a wedding. The most famous DJs are the best people in the world at like manipulating their
yeah,
audience in the most positive sense, right? I know how to
yeah,
bring them up.
yeah,
I know how to make the place explode.
yeah,
I know how to even the energy back out. It's like you kind of have everybody in the palm of your hand,
yeah,
and it's sort of a power not to be taken lightly. How do you give those people such an intense experience who don't really care about the performance of you?
yeah,
Like it's the people who are disappointed in the idea of a DJ today are not people who are going to those shows anyway. Those people are going for a
yeah.
very different reason.
Different whole thing,
And
and
it's
it, yeah.
and to acknowledge anything else is like it's you're missing the point, right?
Yeah, and it really shows you the power of almost like, how do I say this? That we need something to focus on. You
Yeah.
can't have and this was bizarre when I first saw the DJ in the center. It's like, what are they looking at? I remember going to a club and saying, what are they looking at? Oh, no, that's the DJ. I said, oh, they got rid of the corner because they used to build like a little cinder block corner,
Yeah.
right? With it almost looked like a little jail cell. He was in the back and he's sitting there with a dude, some dude eating a burrito in the back. Like it's like the cleanup crew. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's the deal. Oh, that's where the music's coming from.
And it's probably more the DJ being able to see and read the crowd than people watching the DJ. You know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
probably more functional
Yeah.
than about the show. It's like, let me read the crowd. Are they getting more energized? Are people coming to the dance floor? Will that dictate what I play?
Yeah.
And you almost want to be invisible. It's
Yeah.
utilitarian to be up top. And now all of a sudden, let's shift them to the center. Let's bring them way up and let's put all the spotlights on them.
Oh,
And how
yeah.
do you sort of react to that?
But here's the part that's weird, Seth, is a lot of these dudes, the DJs, and I myself included, are extremely nerdy. We were the guys that were really into obscure house beats. We were into techno. very, how do I say it, niche music.
Yeah.
There was nothing mainstream about it. It wasn't sexy at the time. It really was not anything. Let's just say you wouldn't put on MTV. This was
Yeah.
not something. And what I find funny, Seth, is the DJs are still kind of dorky dudes. A lot of these producers, and I just say this because they're not the rock star. This is not
Yeah.
David Lee Roth. It's not Jim Morrison. That's what I find hilarious. It's almost like a marketing scam. You get
Yeah.
some dude who's maybe like this balding guy, kind of a heavy set. Like you get, I'm saying the guys like Doc Martin, even Sasha. These guys were kind of dorky, right? Just
Yeah.
honestly dorky
Well,
dudes.
because they're sort of like tech nerds, right?
Yeah, that's
You
what I'm
have to
saying. They were
you have
tech.
to love like all of the, whether it's being on your laptop and sort of,
Yeah,
I mean, it's that you're functionally a programmer, right? Or even
yeah,
back then, it's all about like knowing your equipment. So
yeah,
it almost be like a prog rock musician, right? It's like, I'm not about the show. I'm not about, three chords and a dream. It's like,
yeah.
it's all about like the tech, the really getting the most out of your equipment and creating an experience, and you are secondary to that. And I think that was the root of it, and that still
100%.
kind of rings true. Yeah.
100%. So that's what I find funny is that they're kind of like the star. And I know it said, have you been to a DJ show or an EDM show?
I've been to a few EDM, like funny enough, believe it or not, Scott, I actually saw John Digweed in Atlanta when I was in college, and having no idea. Like, I had a couple friends who were Irish, who, again, that's still huge over
Yep.
there. And so we went to see him at a club in Atlanta. But I've also seen the other version of it, which is like Lollapalooza. I think I've seen a handful of people, but like Knife Party is the one that always sticks
Yep.
out, where it's just, we were 50 rows back, and it's all about the screens behind them and the light up stuff and the music, kind of bring people up, drop the beat, all that shit. But I couldn't even tell you. I think it was two guys, but like it may have been one. Like, I don't even remember that piece. They were part of, not part of the set, but they were part of the equipment. They were one piece of the machine that was this whole experience. They were not the show. The music was the show, and they were there to sort of be the one. Someone's got to hit play, right? Someone's got to hit play.
Someone's got to hit
that's
play.
kind of what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I find it's a totally different. I think even like Steve Aoki, I remember seeing like he would go in an inflatable boat. There was a lot more now. Like anything, it's commercialized. It's a circus a little bit. The dudes are, and that's the thing. It's like some of them I don't think are born rock stars, and so it's like kind of taking the dorky kid and going, "You're on stage and you're a big thing now," and they're like,
yeah, or even like, I mean, all those
kind of
things.
do this, and you're like, "Here comes the beat." It's like, what the fuck?
Steve Aoki with he throws cake on people. Dead Mouse with the big helmet, marshmallow. It's all like, what? Because people love it's people who love my music are going to come no matter what. How do I convince people who are otherwise not interested in that this is a show worth paying for, not me just hitting buttons?
Exactly.
What's my gimmick? I got to come up with a gimmick. So it's like, oh, well, it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
It's a trademark, and I get that. So how do you build your brand if you aren't a rock star? Well, you got to kind of make yourself into part of the show. And I think the ones who've been most successful have done that.
You're 100% right. And I can only imagine what the promoters are saying. Hey, man, you need a hook. Like, this guy goes out in a moon face. This guy's got a Hello Kitty outfit. What are you doing? You're just going with a black shirt? Like you can't do that.
That's not going to work. Yeah.
No one's going to pay $150 to see just a dude just sitting there. So that's what I think is what I think some of the pushback against this kind of DJ is. But overall, you got to give it up. I think it's amazing that I remember seeing at Coachella the first time. I think it was Neil. I can't remember who the kind of traditional, 4-piece band that was playing. And Chemical Brothers took the whole audience. It was in this was in maybe 2003, 2004, a long time. This is one of the early days of Coachella. And that's when I saw, people there. This is what they're looking for. They want the experience. They want immersion. They're not looking for that linear, there's the band, they play, I sit, I clap when they're done. And I think it was that participation that people like now, where the people, they'll dropping the bass, they're part of it. They inspire the DJ responds. again, you sometimes have that with bands, but it's not as tangible, I don't think.
And I also think it's important to not understate the how important to the scene that the drugs piece is. And
Oh
here's my opinion
God.
why. It's like I think that allows people part of what makes that experience awesome is that it's a very communal experience.
Yeah.
And people, for the most part, are very shy. So I know I've gone, like I went to see a band called Dawes that I love up 2 weeks ago. They played 2 full sets. The first set was very not uncomfortable. The band was amazing, but the crowd was a little tentative. They weren't quite comfortable. It was a little bit of an older crowd.
Yeah.
They took 30-minute break. By the second set, people were so into it. Guess why? Because they'd had like 5 beers. So I think the drug piece of it does something in that it takes away people's like hangups. All of a sudden they're like, I'm going to be part of this greater whole. I'm not self-conscious. I'm not sitting here wanting to talk shit about the DJ. He's not even playing anything because I'm completely immersed in the moment. And I think the drug piece lets people get into that headspace much more easily. So I'm actually talking quite seriously here. I'm not making like, I was going to joke earlier, you know, what came first, the chicken or the X of like, was it drugs or was it music and how they met each other? But I do think that's a pretty important piece of the scene in terms of people just being able to let go and enjoy the experience rather than critique what's not so good about it. You know, like you said, you're part of the performance almost.
Seth, if you took away, at least in the 90s, if you took away, we called it ecstasy at the time, it wouldn't have existed. The ecstasy was vital. And the way you DJ'd, you said, okay, people are going to come in, they're going to drop the E's at around 10 o'clock. So that means by midnight, they're going to be flying. So we're going to play beats at, we're going to do you start off with 130, then we're going to go to 180 because they're going to be on speed and that. So you actually would get your set list to what you think when people were going to be peaking or having the highest high, if you will. So heavily drug related.
Yeah, that's
not that we're advocating drugs on D-Side Stories.
Well, we kind of are, though. I would argue that we are. If you're going to go to
life
a show,
is just better with it, guys.
I guess the thought, if you're going to go to a show and immerse yourself fully, you might as well immerse yourself fully. Maybe that's without being specific. Maybe that's a recommendation. But that's actually really interesting insight, Scott, where the drugs are not only an enhancer or an excuse. It's actually you actually shape your show and what you play and how you perform based on the timing of those things. So that's actually a fascinating insight that people probably don't think about. And so that's why that's why it's good to have an expert in the building.
Oh, well, thank you. You're being too generous. But listen, everyone, we want to thank you and for listening. And I really encourage you to go on YouTube or any type of social media site and type in just DJ and see what you get. And even history of the DJ. It's a fascinating phenomena, I would say, because it's so prevalent now. And that's why we wanted to do this episode. But let us know your thoughts. Am I just a button pusher or an artist? Can I please say artist? Special bonus points if you call me an artist.
He'll buy you dinner if you call me.
Yeah, that's right. Well, listen, everyone. Hey, have a fantastic weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. See ya. Play on.
See you guys.